Character design in FromSoft games is one of the main reasons why I love this game so much. Out of all the creative properties I'm a fan of, including comics, series, movies and video games, the Soulsborne Kiddo Ring saga has always been one of the most consistent, creative and spectacular in terms of character design. Fortunately, its most recent title, Elden Ring, is no exception, featuring a whole range of characters such as Snake Satan, or a beautiful and powerful warrior with elegant and lethal prosthetics, with wings full of butterflies and with rotting pits and And yeah, today I'm gonna be working on that one. I really like her design, it's horrifyingly beautiful. It's not my favorite though, I like MacLeod more, but he's a lot more difficult to make, so I decided to make Malenia. The first step is to make a drawing that would help me to get the proportions under control. It may not be 100% accurate, but I don't care. And yeah, that big thing you see there, that's one of the wings. They are f***ing big. It almost doesn't fit, but we'll talk about that later. For now, let's work on the armature. Right now I need to give some stability to the armature, so I'm gonna wrap the arms and legs with epoxy. Then I'll make these lines so that the clay has something to hold on to, and with that it's time to secure the armature on a base, and now I can start sculpting. For this figure I looked for images of female sculptures, and I found the work of Brian Booth Craig. If you haven't seen his work and if you're interested in this type of sculpture, look him up. His work is pretty f***ing cool. And with the torso now finished, I'll work on the legs, and fortunately for me, because of the mechanical nature of this, I won't have to work on the smaller anatomical details like the knee and stuff like that. The only thing I care about is to solve the general shape of the leg. Another thing I want to do is to soften the parts where the rot would be. It doesn't make sense to make them soft and then give them the rotusy texture special. For the pose I want something like this, hair standing there with a threatening look. As you can see, it's nothing special, with only the intricate details of her design I have enough. I don't want to complicate my life giving her a more difficult pose. For the head I'll start with a little egg to which I'll put small marks to know where to place the mouth, the nose and the eye sockets, and then it is just a matter of making these details one by one, adding little pieces here and there until it starts to look like a human face. Fortunately, Malenia doesn't have eyes, or maybe she has them, but they are under layers and layers of dead skin. I don't know. I'm just happy I don't have to sculpt eyes, and I'm very happy about it since making eyes is not something I'm very good at. Besides, I don't have to worry about it looking too much like the original game model. A generic face with half of it rotten is enough to make it look like Malenia. Rot texture is easy to make. In this case I just grabbed a piece of old Super Sculpey, it was almost dry, and started to cut it in small pieces as you can see, and then I crushed them a bit with my fingers and put them in place. I am very satisfied with the final result of this head, and also I managed to do it relatively fast. That's why some specialized media consider me as the absolute king of art. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time to texture the rot teeth and the rotusy, which followed the same steps as the rotten parts of the face, so nothing new here. With the fried chicken texture set and done, I'll work on the left hand. As it is in a resting pose, it wasn't a big deal. Then I'll stick it in place, and now I'm able to make all those little square details. Now I'm gonna make these holes in the back to eventually put the wings, and with that the first stage of the figure is ready, and it is time to bake this bitch. With the figure completely hard, I'll work on the leg details next. Obviously, being such intricate details, the time and effort required on my part is greater than what I have done so far, but little by little, with a lot of patience, everything can be achieved. Here I will cover the legs with these thin layers of clay, defining the edges until they look accurate enough, and now it's time to work on the feet. At this point I don't want to ruin what I've done on the feet and legs, so I'll bake her a second time. Now I just have to add more and more details on the feet, but this time in epoxy, that way I won't have to bake her again. Sadly, I noticed that I didn't make the details that went in this part. Fortunately, I know how to be calm in times of despair. I know that crying like a little baby over something so dumb wouldn't be worth it. And the only thing I can do now is to destroy and rebuild. So that's what I'm gonna do. First, I'm going to remove the layer that was already there, which is not a difficult task. Then I'll put a new layer, which is not difficult either. What is really difficult is to make these details. The best way to make them symmetrical is to cut them out, as you can see, using a piece of folded paper. It's a bit tedious, but I think it's the best option. Then I'm going to place them on the leg and apply a bit of pressure so that they get printed on the surface. Then I'm going to remove them, and then very carefully, without ruining what I've just done, I'm going to do the same on the other side of the leg. With this part of the leg finished, it is time to work once again on the feet. As I have to bake her again anyway, I'm going to do this last bit with clay because these kind of patterns and decorations that it has there are easier to do with clay. Then all I have to do is to bake her again, and that's it! Another iconic Malenia feature, besides her Rotusi, is her mechanical arm, and this is what I'll work on next. And I think I'll make it piece by piece using air dry clay. Now that every part is ready, I'll assemble the arm with the help of a wire and super glue, and with that done, it is time to make the hand, but I can't make the hand without having the sword. So it's not time to make the hand, but it's time to make the sword to eventually make the hand, for which I need to have the sword already made. So I'll cut a wire the length of the sword, I'll wrap it with epoxy, and when it dries I'll use sandpaper to give it the proper shape. Then I'm going to make those weird markings on both sides. It's a bit tedious, but it has to be done. Then I'm going to make the handle, and with that it's finally time to make the hand. With that, the arm is ready, but I haven't prepared the figure to receive it yet. So first I'm going to make a hole in the body to place the wire that would help me to hold the arm. I'm also going to make some additional details around it. Honestly, I don't know what's that. It's like a piece of worn fabric with a ring. Yeah, I don't really know. I just know that they are part of the design, and in the name of accuracy, I have to make them. Now with all this hardened, I'll attach her arm, and with that I'll work on this shoulder thing. At this moment the body is pretty much finished, so it is time to make the wings. For this I'm going to use the drawing I made at the beginning to make the shape of the wings with wire, and to make them more stable I'm going to put some supports with more wire and epoxy, and later I'm going to cover the whole surface with some layers of air dry clay. At this moment I face a big, fat and nasty problem. If we look closely at Malenia's wings we can see that they are made up of many butterflies. Now, it is true that many specialized media consider me as the absolute king of art, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to make each butterfly one by one. I mean, I could do it, but I'm not a fucking idiot. So looking in my drawer of forgotten things, I found this little butterfly cookie cutter thing. I have no idea where I got it. Probably I stole it from somewhere, I don't know. The fact is that it helps me. So I did a test with a little bit of air dry clay. Although looking at the original model, it should be smaller in relation to the body, but it's such a minuscule difference, so I'm not really worried about that. What really worries me is that it has no texture. So resorting to my eternal wisdom and ability to solve problems, it occurred to me that I could create some sort of stamp to give it the texture. So I grabbed a small group of needles, and after cutting them, deforming them, bending them, twisting them, and gluing them, I managed to create this. So with the mold of unknown origin and the texture stamps in my possession, it is time to give birth to a beautiful swarm of butterflies. So I'm going to flatten a good amount of air dry clay on a cutting board, and I'll start to produce and texture each one of the butterflies. It may be a bit slow and tedious, especially because I need an absurd amount of this, but I think it's the best option in order to create butterflies of a decent quality without taking an eternity to make them. Now with a good amount of butterflies, I'll put air dry clay on the wing, and on top of it I'll glue the butterflies one by one until I have the whole surface filled. Unfortunately, the butterflies I made were only enough to fill one side of one of the wings. So I have to repeat all of this 3 more times. Fortunately for me, since I was very young, I was taught that to achieve what you want, you have to work very hard. Especially when it comes to those things we desire the most. I don't like to imagine the different scenarios that I would like to experience. I like to live them, to feel them. I like to have all my senses down. Still I like to write all the sensations that reality tells me that is in my arms. She looks into the bottom of my soul. We know we're gonna be dreams of all kinds and very good souls. I'm gonna run around what's observed around. Not gonna wait for time. We're lost riders in the vile dreams of all these I know words and riches. But you safety, you would be able to shout in our inside. Now all that is left to do is to put this, I don't know, long, kinda hairy stuff. So I'm going to make little worms of different sizes, then I'm going to give them some texture with a needle, and with that I'm going to glue them on the wings. At this point I just need to make the base, nothing special, it's just a base. I'm gonna texture it in the same way that I textured her Rotusi. I'm also gonna put some tree roots and leaves, because well, looking at the place where she appears in the game, we can see that there are roots and leaves. Obviously I'm also gonna mark where the feet would go, and with that it is time to bake the base. If we look at this image again, we can see that in this scenario there are also some beautiful white flowers, so making them is the next step. Fortunately, within my infinite repertoire of sculptural hacks, I know a fairly easy method to make flowers that consist of what you are watching right now, like in this specific moment.
Look at the screen right now.
I'm not gonna explain it, just look at it. That's a beautiful flower, isn't it? Leave a like on this video and comment what you think of that flower, okay? So the point is that by using this method I made several flowers. When they dried I glued them in small groups, then I covered the needle with a bit of air dry clay and inserted it under the flowers, and then I made some branches that would connect with the central part of each one of these flower groups. I made a good amount of these groups, some with 3 flowers, others with 5 flowers, 6 flowers, 7 flowers, and once I had a good amount of these groups, I glued them onto the base. If you activate your shotgun, you'll see that in this image there are also this type of flowers. I don't remember how they're called, but I also made a few of these. They were very easy to make. Unlike the other flowers, I stuck them in place with a wire wrapped in air dry clay. At this point the figure, wings and base were ready, but I'm not going to attach them yet. Painting is the next step, starting with the skin tone. With the skin tone finished, it's time to bring out all that rot texture, starting with a reddish dry brush, followed by a dark brown wash, followed by a yellowish grey dry brush, and that's it. Now the rot looks convincingly nasty and crispy. The arm with the little squares and the right knee will receive a dark brown coat as a base tone, and over this I will apply a metallic grey dry brush. And before painting the prosthetic arm, I'm going to paint this part. The arm will receive a coat of gold paint. As the base color of the clay is white, only one coat of paint is enough to get a good coverage. Then I will paint the ring, the hand and the sword. Now the arm looks very nice and clean. Unfortunately, this arm is supposed to be very dirty and rusty, so it is also time to give it a good black wash. With that, the body is pretty much finished, so it's time to paint the wings. I'll start by applying a grey base tone. I should have used grey clay, you know, to save some time, but too late for that. And then I'm going to ruin the look of this wing, painting it all black. Because the mix of water and paint for the wash ended up with more paint than water, and now the wings look all black. But that's not a problem at all. I just need to give them a grey dry brush to make them look sick and cool and hip. The wings are not just grey. Looking at some reference photos, I was able to spot some red and orange butterflies, so I'll paint some of them in those colors. Then I'll finish painting the wings by covering those hair things with a few coats of a beautiful crimson red. With the body and the wings finished, the only thing left to do is to paint the base. With that, the base is ready and it's time to assemble everything. First, I'm going to cover those wires with some epoxy. Epoxy is very resistant, and when it dries it gets extremely hard, so it is perfect for this type of tasks. Then I'm going to put some super glue in the holes of the base to finally attach the figure. With the wings, the process will be very similar. First, covering those wires with a good amount of epoxy, and then putting all of these into the holes that I had left in the back. To make sure that they stay in place, I'm going to glue one, wait for it to dry, and then glue the other one. Obviously, the weight of the wings ended up being too much for the figure. It started to bend backwards, and that made me panic a little bit, but fortunately bending the wings a little bit so that they were pointing forward was enough to balance the weight of the figure. At this point, there are only two things left to do. First, I need to cover up that horrible seam on the wings, and then I need to make her beautiful scarlet hair. For the seam on the wings, I will follow the same process I did with the rest of the wings. First, gluing a good amount of butterflies until the surface is completely filled, add a few of those hair things, and paint. And finally, for the hair, I'm going to mix some air dry clay with red paint. Then I'm going to make a bunch of thin, long worms, which I'm going to texture with a needle. And then I just have to put them one by one until the whole head is covered. And that's it! And holy f***, I think this has been the most complex figure I've done for the channel, but I'm very happy with the result, and I hope you also liked it. I've been wanting to do something from FromSoft games for a long time, and I'm happy that I finally did it. And yep, that's it. Leave a like, subscribe, and all that. Take care, bye!